If someone had whispered to me, after 3.5 decades of wedded life, that a misaligned painting on the wall would herald the onset of profound transformation, I would have found it amusing. I would have simply shaken my head, returned to my laundry, and mused. Some individuals truly possess vivid imaginations, yet now, I have gained a deeper understanding now. I am known as Maggie. I have reached the age of 63. For more than 30 years, I have called the same house my home, shared countless goodnight kisses with the same man, and folded an unimaginable number of towels, far more than any individual ought to. I once believed I understood the true visage of love, the essence of safety experienced, the essence of home. Perhaps I did at one time, yet a transformation occurs when you fade from the gaze of others. Not in an overly theatrical manner. Silence reigns, with no raised voices, no forceful closures, and no anguished sobs. Simply serene. Prolonged, gentle pauses linger between two individuals, gradually erasing the memory of their once intimate connection. In the midst of one of those quiet moments, a knock echoed from my door, and it was Dennis. A mere visit, merely a request, a solitary figure, stepping forward to right a frame that had leaned askew for weeks, unnoticed by all around. Yet he observed, perhaps, thus commenced the journey. This is not a scandal. It is not a confession. Possesses a certain tranquility, a concept more challenging to articulate. It's a tale of a woman who dedicated her existence to the love of others. At last, she embraced the art of self-love. It all began with that askew painting hanging on the wall. In a quaint Midwestern town, where the grocery store is but a single establishment, two charming coffee shops beckon, and neighbors greet each other with friendly waves from their porches. The stillness envelopes this place. Unsurprising. Some may even describe it as serene. Yet, tranquility can often tread the fine line that leads to solitude. I am known as Maggie. At 63 years of age, I have witnessed the passage of time in this town, recalling fondly the days when the hardware store brimmed with penny candy and the librarian greeted each child by name. At the age of 27, I entered into matrimony with Walter. We were blessed with two beautiful children, who have now blossomed into adults, each with families of their own. The house carries a different essence in their absence. More subdued, perhaps a touch too quiet. For 35 years, Walter and I have shared our lives together. An entire lifetime, indeed. He is a good man, dependable, unwavering, the sort of husband for whom gratitude is an unspoken expectation. Indeed, I am. Yet there are moments when gratitude seems more like a phrase uttered than a genuine emotion experienced. Walter has always found solace in the quietude. He toils away, peruses the daily paper, and keeps abreast of the news. Our discussions tend to revolve around the mundane, groceries, the shifting patterns of the weather, or the precise hour of his golf tee-off this weekend. Poses no threat. Abstain from cruelty. Only emptiness. My days unfold gently and at a leisurely pace. I immerse myself in the written word. In the quiet corners of my backyard, I nurture my small garden. Roses unfurling their petals, hydrangeas bursting with color, and fragrant herbs nestled in terracotta pots. I find myself baking beyond necessity, freezing more than I consume. I tend to the porch plants even after the rain has fallen. At times, I find myself pondering whether my actions stem from a desire to feel a sense of purpose. In all honesty, I find myself in solitude more often than I would like to acknowledge. And not the kind of solitude that brings peace, but the kind that echoes with the absence of something essential. A pursuit you abandoned long ago. I believed that was simply the nature of aging. You find your pace, releasing the hold of the melody. Yet recently, I've begun to perceive something once more. A subtle whisper, a low murmur beneath the stillness. Unbeknownst to me, life was on the verge of making its presence felt. Gently, unexpectedly, and not with solutions, but with the inquiries I had long kept to myself. Walter and I have ceased to share the same room for our slumber. The choice was hardly monumental. There is no conflict. Let warmth guide your words. Simply unfolded. As with countless subtle nuances in a lengthy union, it transformed gently, initially overlooked, until it became the accepted reality. His snores resonate through the night. Slumber eludes me, as I find myself wrestling with the elusive embrace of sleep. He prefers the gentle hum of the fan, while I cherish the fresh breeze from the open window. Those were the justifications we offered to our own minds. Rational, innocuous, yet the reality was more straightforward and infinitely more poignant. We had become accustomed to existing alongside one another without truly connecting. In the early hours, we crossed paths in the corridor. He cradling his coffee and I, draped in my robe, and we exchange a nod. Greet the day with a simple morning. During dinner, we find ourselves enveloped in silence or engaged in discussions about the dog's medication, the neighbor's newly erected fence, and the latest sale at the hardware store. Topics that ensure a sense of security. Words devoid of substance. Walter does not possess a cruel nature. He has never elevated his tone. He continues to settle the bills punctually, continues to bring in the trash cans without prompting. Yet, at some point in our journey, he ceased to notice my presence. And in some way, I ceased to seek recognition. There's an oddity to the experience of feeling unseen within the very walls that should embrace you. To traverse the spaces you've adorned, the memories you've crafted, and to experience the sensation of a specter gliding through the realm of the living. I hold no resentment towards him. Not completely. Even the most resilient bonds can fray when left unattended by the hands of care. Nor was I tending to the roots in any meaningful way. Yet, from time to time, I find myself catching a fleeting glimpse of us in a reflection, on a window, in a photograph, and I ponder. When did we transform into strangers who share the same keys? Moreover, which fragments of my essence did I forsake in the whirlwind of my role as a wife? Dennis has woven himself into the fabric of our lives for as long as my memory stretches. In the halls of college, he and Walter found themselves as roommates, forging a bond over shared fishing trips. They were the sort of friends who understood that their connection didn't hinge on daily conversations. The assurance of unwavering support was enough to sustain their friendship. It was Dennis, in fact, who first brought me into the orbit of Walter during a summer picnic, a time when we were still fresh out of our 20s. He presented me with a plate of corn on the cob and remarked, "You ought to meet my friend. He may struggle with conversation, yet he excels in loyalty." He was not mistaken. Through the passage of time, Dennis transformed into a figure akin to family. He remained unwed, drifting from one place to another, never lingering for too long. He toiled in construction, traversing the state and occasionally venturing beyond its borders, yet he consistently returned every few months for a visit, particularly during those times when Walter was absent, such as during his yearly fishing expedition with his brothers. It was at that moment that Dennis would make his entrance, perpetually equipped with an array of essentials: a toolbox, a six-pack, and a fresh narrative waiting to unfold. He possessed an uncanny ability to appear just when the house fell into its deepest silence. Dennis stood in stark contrast to Walter. In contrast to Walter's reserved demeanor, Dennis exuded a quiet warmth that felt both effortless and genuine. His voice possessed a quality that invited you to release a breath you didn't know you were holding. His laughter didn't resonate throughout the room, yet it hung in the shadows, a soft echo in the corners. He always maintained a quiet demeanor. He always departed before the shadows grew too deep. Yet, whenever a task required attention, a dripping faucet, a creaky door, a painting slightly out of place, Dennis was invariably well into the repair before I had the chance to voice my concern. He possessed a certain steadiness, an understated dignity that seemed increasingly rare in the world around me. Perhaps that explains why, when he rapped on my door that afternoon, a lopsided grin gracing his face and a toolbox clutched in his hand, I welcomed him without a moment's pause. It began with a dripping faucet and a misaligned painting. The kitchen sink had been persistently dripping for weeks on end. Just a slow, rhythmic tap, 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 reminiscent of a clock counting moments I had let slip by unnoticed. The painting in the hallway had been askew for what felt like an eternity, its angle disrupted perhaps by a hasty move or the careless tug of a vacuum cord. I had strolled by it countless times, each time with the intention of mending it, yet always lingering on the edge of action. Dennis observed both within mere moments of entering. "Would you like me to inspect that leak?" he inquired, his sleeves already being rolled up. "And that painting," he remarked, gesturing subtly with his chin. "It's pushing me to the brink of madness." A smile graced my lips. "Certainly, if it wouldn't be too much of an inconvenience." He gave a playful wink. "You're familiar with my penchant for mending." It was a small yet profound moment, observing him kneel beneath the sink, deftly tightening the valve with a skill that spoke of familiarity. With forearms taut and hands unwavering, he stood resolute. I rested against the doorframe, arms folded, making a conscious effort to avert my gaze. As he rose, drying his hands on a dish towel, our gazes intertwined. Only for a fleeting moment. Yet, a change occurred. His gaze held a gentle warmth that enveloped me. Neither flirtatious nor suggestive. Simply cozy. "Here it is." It felt as though he wasn't merely looking at me, he was truly observing me. It had been an eternity since I last experienced that sensation. As he made adjustments to the painting, he took a step back, tilted his head thoughtfully, and then cast a glance in my direction. "Improved?" he inquired. I inclined my head in acknowledgement. "A great deal." In the hallway we lingered, our gazes fixed on the painting, each of us feigning ignorance of the unspoken moment that had just unfolded between us. Yet something had indeed transpired, something elusive beyond my grasp. Yet, beneath the surface, I found myself questioning whether I truly wished to overlook it. Following that afternoon, Dennis began to linger a bit more during his visits. Not quite sufficient to provoke inquiries, merely ample to resonate. His dialogues transformed as well. More than the headlines or the state of the neighbor's yard. Further exploration of memory, remorse, anticipation. "Have you ever pondered the paths not taken?" he inquired softly, his tone barely above a whisper, as if he feared the response. After a moment of uncertainty, I gave a slight nod. "At times, I don't engage in it as frequently as I once did. However, indeed." He refrained from pressing forward. He never did. Yet, an unspoken heaviness lingered in the atmosphere surrounding us, as if we were both positioned close to something delicate, something we feared to disturb, but could not overlook either. It was then that the phone call arrived. On that Thursday evening, the air was thick with anticipation. Delayed. Walter had retired for the night, as was his custom, while I nestled on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, a half-finished novel resting in my lap when the phone vibrated. "Dennis." "Hey," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "Is there solitude in your presence?" I hesitated before responding. In the stillness of the house, the only sounds were the rhythmic ticking of the clock and the gentle hum of the refrigerator. "Indeed," I replied at last. "I exist. Would it be all right if I dropped by?" I'm uncertain. I wish I could linger a little longer." My heart raced with a heightened rhythm. I'm uncertain of the reason, yet I acquiesced. Upon his arrival, a silence enveloped us, leaving words unspoken. He reclined in the armchair, while I remained nestled within the warmth of my blanket. We conversed gentle, unhurried, about literature, about melodies, about all and yet nothing at all. No contact was made. There shall be no admissions. It was a silence so profound that it seemed to take on a form of its own. Within the depths of that stillness, for the first time in years, I felt a profound sense of visibility. A week had passed before our paths crossed once more. The air had grown colder, autumn firmly establishing its presence this time. Upon my return from the grocery store, I found Dennis perched on the porch, casually leaning against the railing, as if he had been anticipating my arrival for some time. As I drew near, he glanced up, a faint smile gracing his lips, and then he assisted me in bringing the bags indoors. Our conversations were few and far between. The presence of him enveloped the house in a warmth I couldn't quite comprehend. He lingered at the kitchen table as I tucked the milk away into the fridge. His gaze lingered on me, silent yet unwavering. At last, the words escaped his lips. "That night lingers in my thoughts, refusing to fade away." I stood motionless, the carton of eggs clutched tightly in my grasp, not due to any sense of astonishment. Yet, I found myself unable to cease pondering it as well. I pivoted gradually to meet his gaze, He maintained his gaze. "I haven't either," I murmured, my voice scarcely rising above a whisper. He rose to his feet and advanced a few paces in my direction. His movements were unhurried, each action deliberate and measured. "Take your time. Only existence." He extended his hand, softly, and grasped mine. I remained steadfast, unwilling to retreat. His hand radiated warmth, recognizable, uneven in certain areas, and yet, in some inexplicable way, soothing. In the stillness, we remained, two souls intertwined, our hands clasped in a wordless promise that lingered in the air, unspoken yet profoundly understood. There was no kiss. There will be no grand pronouncements. The raw, poignant reality of two souls who had lingered in the shadows for an eternity, now illuminated. And in that instant, I realized this was not merely about the act of falling in love. It was a journey back to the essence of being desired, to be recognized, to be grasped, if merely by a hand and not by a vow. He visited once again. The morning unfolded in shades of gray, a sky lingering in indecision. As I tended to the rose bushes in the front yard, I caught sight of his truck making its way into the driveway. He emerged without a smile. Yet he didn't appear angry either, merely contemplative. We lingered on the porch. Without coffee, there's no room for idle chatter. Only the coolness of the wood beneath us and the quietude shared by two individuals grappling with unspoken words. At last, Dennis faced me. "I'm not asking you to make a choice," he said. "However, I must understand your position." I gazed contemplatively at the expanse of the yard. The roses began to fade, their petals curling inward as if seeking refuge from an unseen threat. "I cherish my husband," I uttered with deliberation. "Yet, I find myself at a loss for what this signifies." He nodded, as if he had anticipated my response all along. "I harbor no regrets," he declared, his tone unwavering. "You are important to me, perhaps more than is advisable. However, my intention is not to add any complexity to your existence." I simply couldn't let the silence linger. He extended his hand toward mine, if only for a fleeting moment. A gentle caress, almost non-existent, and then he rose to his feet. "I shall grant you the solitude you seek," he remarked. "No matter what you choose, I will honor your decision." He left without a word of farewell. She cast me a glance, one of those glances that conveys, "We'll bear this burden together, even if it remains unspoken." He descended the steps, climbed into his truck, and drove off into the distance. As I lingered in that moment, an unmistakable sense of closure washed over me, intertwined with the exhilarating whisper of new beginnings on the horizon. I did not abandon anyone. I have not betrayed anyone. I did not set my life ablaze and flee with another man. Yet, a transformation stirred within me, silently, unchangeably. For years, I had defined my existence through the roles I inhabited: wife, mother, neighbor, helper. I had occupied each hour with something of value. Anticipated, indeed, yet I had lost the art of truly hearing my own voice. Dennis did not alter the course of my existence. He never requested that of me. He merely raised a mirror, and within that reflection, I beheld a version of myself I hadn't gazed upon in decades. A woman who continued to feel. A woman yearning for desire's embrace. A woman who had not succumbed to the relentless passage of time. Rather, she had quietly receded into the shadows, poised for the moment when someone would gaze deeply enough to uncover her presence. The essence of loving Dennis was not the focus. What held significance was the realization that I remained deserving of attention, still deserving of warmth. Yet, the value of softness endures. Perhaps the most terrifying aspect of it all was not the fleeting moment we shared, but the profound understanding that I had spent an eternity neglecting to inquire about my own needs. Walter has never caused me any harm, yet I had ceased to be present in the narrative of my own existence. And not a soul observed it, not even I, until Dennis took action. He reminded me, not through elaborate displays or vows, but simply by being there, in quietude, through the profound and unexpected gesture of truly perceiving me in my authentic form, rather than through the lens of the labels that had been affixed to me. That was the undeniable reality. It is not an affair. It is not a confession. A gentle journey back to the essence of who I am. and it transformed the entire landscape. Have you ever found yourself nestled beside someone you cherish, and yet the sense of solitude lingers on? Have you ever navigated the routines of existence with such precision, such grace, that one day you found yourself awakening to the realization? Could it be that the last time you truly felt something has slipped from your memory entirely? This tale does not revolve around treachery. It's not merely about crossing a line. It revolves around the act of awakening. It speaks to the gentle reclamation of a self that had been muted by the passage of time, by the weight of duty, by affection that had settled into routine. Maggie chose to stay with her husband. She neither pursued passion nor fled from her existence. Yet, she undertook an act of even greater courage. She hesitated. She paid attention. She permitted herself to embrace her emotions once more. At times, the most transformative experiences are subtle and quiet. They lack any explosive qualities. They arrive in a handheld form that feels prolonged, a gaze that holds on longer than it should, in the pain of finally being acknowledged after a long stretch of obscurity. Have you ever sensed that your voice faded away amidst the clamor of trying to be everything for everyone else? This tale was crafted with you in mind. A gentle nudge to acknowledge your presence endures. You continue to hold significance. You have every right to desire more than mere contentment. If this narrative resonated with you, hold onto it tightly. We invite you to share your thoughts. Have you ever experienced the sensation of being invisible in your own life? Subscribe to uncover more authentic, subtle, and impactful narratives just like this one. If there's someone in your life who longs to be acknowledged once more, pass this along to them this evening, for the simple reason that the reality is, at times, the most courageous act we can undertake is to reconnect with our true selves.